School for 26 years. I love teachers. I mean, I really do. I actually married 5 of them. That's my attempt at a little humor today, because in today's world, we got to find the humor where we can. But I believe so strongly that you all make a difference in children's lives. And at Big Fork today, I was emphasizing, the very thing that made you want to be in education, because how much you care about children, that's what guides us in difficult times. And it's like, let your heart be your guide. But I'm going to go through some slides today, and maybe the simplest thing I can start with is that I already know I'm not the only person in this room who had their life affected by a suicide. I lost my father when I was 25. I remember every aspect of that conversation, that last one with him. I only wish I'd have known enough to be able to ask, are you telling me you don't want to live? Are you thinking you want to kill yourself? I'm pretty sure he would have answered honestly, and then I would have known what to do. The bottom line is, though, we can't prevent all the suicides in this country, but we can prevent most of them. And I called from my brother not long ago, and by the way, he's my rich older brother. He's got 3 homes. One of them is a beautiful condo on the west coast of Florida. But he called last winter, and I could tell he was really upset. I said, Steve, what is it? He said, my neighbor Bob, I just arrived and I heard he held a gun to his head in the parking lot yesterday. Well, Steve, did anybody rush Bob to the emergency room? No, they didn't. Does Bob still have his gun available? Well, I actually asked his wife about that. She said, oh, I couldn't possibly take away his guns. Then my brother said, what difference would that make? Steve, because my brother had it, he'll just find another way, right? Steve, the research is pretty clear. Research from Harvard, meansmatter.com. All around the world, you remove the lethal means, and there's every likelihood that there will not be a suicide. Then I'm pretty proud of my brother, because I asked a little more about Bob, and I found out that Bob had Parkinson's, and Bob was really struggling with depression as a part of his Parkinson's, but the depression wasn't being treated. My brother actually went to the doctor with Bob, where he shared his suicidal behavior, and Bob's getting treatment now for the accompanying depression, and Bob's still with us. So I believe strongly that there's a lot of good treatment out there, but there are challenges in, first of all, overcoming the stigma and then having that treatment available. So yes, I've been to Montana many times, sadly. I think you all know that Montana, unfortunately, has a pretty significant problem with suicide and youth suicide. My partner is a retired principal. We wrote this for the state of Montana 4 years ago. It's Crisis Action School Toolkit on Suicide for Montana. And I'm sorry that it's been so needed and so utilized in postvention. By the way, prevention is everybody knowing the warning signs, what to look for, what to do, getting the person to help. Intervention is providing that help. And then sadly, postvention is, what do we have to do in the aftermath to help everybody with their shock, their grief, their confusion, yes, sometimes even guilt? And how do we work together to prevent suicide? I want to be honest, I'm very impressed with the school district and all the things that are being done. But suicide prevention is not something that schools can do alone. It really takes the entire community. That means parents, that means mental health, law enforcement, survivors, clergy, medical community. It takes everybody together. And here's something that might surprise you. About 70% of the time, the person of any age who died by suicide actually went to see the family physician. I know my father did. So physicians actually have a tremendous opportunity to be alert to depression and warning signs. We actually had a national recommendation that came out 12 years ago saying every teenager seeing the physician for any reason should be asked direct questions about joy of life, depression, and suicide. So those are the state plans that we have worked on. And I only began with this just to let you know that I've spent 40 years on this, and I'm still trying to learn more about what we can all do. Those are all the places that, yes, they experience suicide point clusters. You might be wondering, what is that? Well, obviously, it's more suicides than we would ever expect in a short space of time in a relatively confined geographical area. So when I hear of yet another youth suicide, I actually think of it pretty simply. Untreated or undertreated mental illness, often in combination with adverse childhood experiences. All those things you don't want a kid to experience. Rejection from a natural parent, living in poverty, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, living with a parent who's mentally ill, living with a substance abusing parent, being the victim of severe bullying, having losses of loved ones. So it's always a combination of all those adverse childhood experiences and mental illness. When I did get a chance to meet with some of your high school students, I asked them to think about who is your go-to adult? And why is that a trusted adult you would go to? Because what I really believe, so many tragedies that took the life of a young person could have been prevented if somebody had just gone to an adult and said, I'm worried about my friend. The most obvious question, though, is why don't kids go to adults for help? Here's what they say. I didn't think it could happen. I didn't want to get involved. I feared retaliation, or I've been conditioned not to tell. Let's see if you can finish this phrase. Snitches get, unfortunately, we all know that. I wish everybody knew more of the lines of see something, say something, get to a trusted adult. Again, most suicides can be prevented. And Eric, I'm already having technology problems here. Can you advance that slide for me? Okay. So the challenge of social media. You know what I could argue today? Suicide of a young person is like taking a rock and throwing it into a pond. That ripple effect is everywhere. And sadly, we know it's all throughout the Flathead Valley. Vulnerable young people, and there are a lot of them, they're very affected when they're aware of negative events and suicides of other young people. Adolescents are the most susceptible to imitating suicidal behavior. And we got to work on prevention everywhere. You know, everybody usually thinks, okay, it's maybe the closest friends. It's not really the closest friends. It's other young people in the community or the valley that have their own sad set of circumstances. And I already talked about simply it takes the village. And by the way, you're very fortunate in this part of Montana to have the Nate Shute Foundation. I need to thank them for bringing me to Kalispell. But Casey Howard and her team worked very hard on suicide prevention. All right, Erica, next slide, please. So, and go ahead and just put every one of the points up for this slide. Second leading cause of death for every kid over the age of 10. Good news, thankfully it's rare for children under the age of 10. But I've had to respond to kids as young as the age of 9 who died by suicide. There's a little semantic thing. If you say my father committed something, I might say you commit a crime, you commit a burglary. The term died by seems to imply they traveled a long road. And even a 16-year-old kid traveled a long road. In all honesty, it was everyone's fault, yet it was actually no one's fault. And the answers, they died with them. Could we talk about general factors that are involved in youth suicide? We already have. Mental illness and adverse childhood experiences. But please try to stop anybody from focusing on, I heard this, I heard that. Because really, The focus has to be on the living. How do we help the kids that are still with us? How do we support the families that lost a loved one to suicide? And all over the country, and generally, I hear from one or two people around the country every single day about this problem. But for some years, I've been hearing more and more elementary age students are talking about suicide. And the counselor always asks, do I need to take it seriously? Yes, every single time. I wish they could, if they're 10 years old, could just say, I'm frustrated or I'm mad about this. But if they are talking about suicide, we've got to take it seriously and get their parents involved. Okay, next slide, Erica. So if I was sitting there, I'd want somebody to talk about what works. This is from the World Health Organization. I think I pretty well covered point one, but I always try to be clear to say something. I'm not going to question any adult's right to own a gun. But if you have a troubled, angry, depressed, substance abusing, mentally ill person in your own family, then there's a responsibility to secure that gun. Rarely does anybody ever get a second chance if a lethal weapon is involved. And I already talked about physicians and their important role as well. And having gone to all those communities, let me be honest, the one group that's the most frustrating, that's physicians. They don't come to the table. They need to come to the table and figure out how they can improve the detection of depression and suicidal behavior for every one of the patients that see them. Okay, Erica, moving on again, thanks. I think you already know the highest suicide rates for decades have always been Alaska, Montana, Wyoming. We could spend a lot of time talking about some of those reasons why. They probably immediately come to you. And if I were to quickly cover suicide across ages, rare under the age of 10. Second leading cause of death for Americans between the age of 10 and 34. Then suicide rates go down a bit, but we're really concerned about especially our veterans that are in the middle age group. And then suicide rates go up again for the elderly. You're actually looking at one of the highest risk groups in America. It's an old white guy like me. If we have family health and financial problems, we can be very much at risk. But you know, having been a psychologist all these years, you know what I think life's really about? It's having a purpose and having meaning. And I'm pretty sure you all get a great deal of meaning from your work with young people. But for an elderly person who's all alone, it might be as simple as having a dog, having a reason to get up every morning, having that dog giving them that unconditional love. And think for a moment, who might be the most protected against suicide by race and gender? If Black females came to mind, that's absolutely the right answer. And what's the reason why they have less suicide rates? It's sisterhood, it's faith, and it's purpose. And maybe that's something we can all learn from. So what protects against a youth suicide? These are all pretty straightforward. I'm not going to give you an example of all of them, but you know, here's something I said to all the Parkland parents, and I truly believe this. When a kid is in a stable family, when they're shown unconditional love every day, every way, they can overcome almost anything. But I think you're aware of kids that are not in stable families. They're in the middle every day, every way, with issues that their parents have. Or maybe they're not shown that unconditional love. If any of you were at the Canvas Church last Monday, I had a pretty clear message. And let me ask you a question. How many of you are parents? Would you mind raising your hands? How many of you are parents of adolescents? I am so sorry. Of course, I don't really mean that. But this is a pretty challenging time to parent an adolescent. And a lot of that has to do with social media. And a pretty simple thought I have is social media and all that technology, it's a privilege. It's not a right. And in an auditorium once I said, don't let technology steal your child. Somebody jumped up and said, they've already been stolen. So maybe it's a matter of trying to work with the parents that still have young children, but reasonable limits on the technology. And then one of my favorite apps, it's called the Rethink app. Basically, if you're about to post something that's hurtful, words are recognized and you get like this message saying, maybe you'd like to rethink that. And helping kids understand that once it's posted, boy, it is out there. But I want to give one simple example. And I'm going to use my son as an example. Jeremy was 8 years old. Jeremy, I need to talk to you a little more about the death of your grandfather. He says, I know what happened to him. He had a heart attack. It's true, son, he had a heart attack. Jeremy said, I'm sorry I never met him. Jeremy, there's a little more to the story. And I want you to hear this from me, never from someone else. 2 weeks after his heart attack, your grandfather shot himself. The word is suicide. Now that you're 8, maybe you can understand that. He said, you lied to me. No, waiting to give you complete information when I thought you could understand it. Then he looks up and he says, oh, you shouldn't feel guilty. Oh, why is that? Well, your dad wasn't a psychologist like mine. He didn't teach you all the things I know about the importance of feeling good about yourself. I mean, Dad, everybody has problems. Kids just have to go to adults for help and always know whatever it is, they're going to get through it. Now, wasn't that sweet? He was trying to alleviate my guilt. What's the most important point? He's 8. He believes he's a good person. Isn't that what you want for every kid in Kalispell? Just to believe they're a good person? Whatever comes along, they will get help and they will get through it. So, gosh, what's this slide saying? Suicide prevention in America is not funded. That is one of our great challenges. Moving on again. So, you're a teacher. And imagine you walk by and you notice a kid posted something on the screen, or maybe he's researching how to kill himself. Literature estimates that 25% of the youth suicide victims, they did a search about suicide and how to kill themselves. So what should you do as a teacher? Well, obviously, you're going to work as part of a team, but you might be tempted to just say, go to the counselor now. I could give you examples where kids left the building and then a frantic search ensues to try to find them. So the real answer here is to somehow get them escorted to the school counselor, call for help, get somebody of an adult nature to actually come and get them. So here's the quote from the Surgeon General. Pretty straightforward. All these suicides every single year in this country, we got to talk about it more in our homes, our schools, our workplace, and our places of worship. But let's be honest, most of us are a little worried about what exactly to say. And by the way, if there were magic words, I certainly would tell them to you. With kids, it's really the most about, I'm here for you. Anytime you want to talk, I am here to listen. Now, I want to be honest in saying, I think all adults, including myself, we have a tendency to talk too much to kids, to give them too much advice, as opposed to just really listening. And I'll give you the example of Jeremy also loved basketball. So anytime, day or night, no matter how tired I was, if he'd say, Dad, will you rebound? Now I'm out in the driveway, I put on the lights. I am not saying a word. He's relaxed, he's shooting something he really enjoys. And all of a sudden he starts talking to me. I would respond with something based on all those graduate years of studying psychology with my best. Wow. I'm not sure, son. That's a hard one. What are you thinking? Now, I did hear from some of your high school students that they just want more opportunities to talk, more opportunities for you to listen. And it does help sometimes when we share just a little bit of our vulnerability about how we're feeling about something, but without going into great detail. But just, this is hard for me. It's a really sad day. I'm not sure what we do next. What are you thinking? The more that we can actually get them to talk to us. And I always knew with our 4 children that when I talked too much, all of a sudden the conversation was over. One other part. Somehow I doubt I'm the only person in here that experienced a divorce. For me, that was 7 times. Just kidding, okay? Trying to see if you're really listening. It was only once. But my wife, Dawn, and I, we always make a point of referring to them. They're all our children, not his children, her children. They're all ours and part of our family. So don't be afraid to just simply ask someone. And then you're going to know whether you got to stay with them every moment until we get them transferred to mental health professionals or law enforcement. When you actually ask, basically, it gives a young person a chance to unburden themselves, to know, I'm not the first person to feel this way. There is help available. So we just all need to get a little more comfortable with talking about what is a very difficult subject. Moving on again, Center for Disease Control, they spell this out pretty simply. Connections. Connections in the workplace, the community, places of worship, connections in the school are very preventative. The National Institute of Mental Health did a comprehensive study of adolescents. I could sum it up in one sentence. School connection is pretty much the key to everything for an adolescent. But we all have kids in our schools that are not connected, and that's part of our challenge. One of my favorite examples was Sydney, New York. The principal said, here's what I do at my middle school. I put up a picture one at a time of every single kid in the school, and I go, what's his name? Okay, his name's Larry. What's Larry involved in? Oh, Larry's not involved in anything. Who's going to meet with him, find out what Larry likes, and how do we get him connected to a school activity? So maybe go back one if you could, please, Erica. All right. Particular challenges for Montana. You all know those challenges. But what have we actually found out with the limited studies of youth suicide? We found out there's often a lot of pressure on young people, mental health concerns, family problems, maybe involved in bullying. So let me address that for a moment. No research says bullying causes suicide, because how are you going to rule out all the other possible factors? But there is a strong association between bullying and suicide. So what do I want you to remember? If you know a kid is a victim of bullying, don't hesitate to ask. Have you ever thought you would just give up? Have you ever thought you don't want to live? Have you ever thought you might want to go away, never come back? Or maybe a little more direct. Have you ever thought you might just kill yourself? So adolescents in particular can be really overwhelmed with lots of things going on in their life. And the fourth R, in my opinion, the fourth R is relationships. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and in that fourth R is being connected to that trusted adult in the school. So quick quiz for you, and I'm sure you're going to do really well on this. If a student is intent on killing himself, there's nothing anybody can do to stop them. The answer to that, if I can get it to move, Eric, I may need your help again. It's false. So let's go back one. And Voltaire, in the year 1764, I'm only slightly changing his words. The young man in the fit of melancholy who died by suicide today might have wanted to live had he merely waited a week. Can you see what your job is? By the way, the good news here, no kid is suicidal 24/7. So that means the intervention in any one person can make all the difference in the world. Our next one, those who talk about it, because sometimes people will think, oh, they're just talking about it for attention. We don't need to worry. You know what I think they're just telling us? I need help. Get me help. Because kids that have talked about this for a while. And the bottom line is that they just have not received enough help to this point. And the next one is really about only an expert, somebody with the mental health degree, can prevent a suicide. And the answer to that is, of course, false. Anyone can. In fact, where we need the most intervention is their friends who don't hesitate to get one of you involved. Let's put up the entire slide about a few facts quickly, if you would, Erica. So the bottom line is suicide is not fate, it is not inherited, it is not destiny. Most suicide victims did not leave a note. There is a relationship between self-injury and suicide. More about that in just a moment. Suicide is not a common reaction to being bullied. That's the good news. Millions of kids get bullied. I looked this up just the other day. We're averaging a little over 2,000 high school students in America that die by suicide annually. And I don't know if any of you saw the program 13 Reasons Why. Pretty much probably all of your students did. But there were so many dangerous messages in that program. Because suicide isn't about revenge. Suicide is about ending unendurable pain. It's about tunnel vision and constriction. Other dangerous messages in that program were the idea that suicide is a logical outcome to being bullied. But you know what bothered me the most? And I had to force myself to watch all 4 seasons because I was doing webinars on the dangers of the program. What bothered me the most, and if you saw the program, you would know this. The adults were never portrayed as somebody a kid goes to for help. It's like every kid was leading secret lives involving sex, drugs, and reckless behavior and violence, and somehow no adults had any idea what was going on in their life. And they portrayed the school counselor as like a total zero. School counselors got degrees in counseling to try to help kids. So it was a great disservice to every school counselor in America. So if you would you just take a moment and look at this particular slide? Might be a high school senior, maybe a college freshman. It looks like things aren't going well in his life. He might have just banged his head against the mirror. There's been a breakup. I'm not able to concentrate and study. I may be failing out at my freshman year of college. I may not be able to graduate. What would you say to him? These are the situations we face. Hopefully, you would say something like this: recognizing the pain, recognizing being overwhelmed, asking directly, are you thinking of giving up? Are you thinking of suicide? Absolutely critical that we recognize what people are going through and we're asking directly about thoughts of suicide. So there's the sad news for the state of Montana. That's what the high school students say about the last 12 months. So I can do the math. I think there's around 1,400 students in this building. That would mean our best estimate, 140 of them attempted suicide in the last 12 months. You know what's really scary? For the most part, you don't know who they are. Who knows all about it? That's going to be their friends. But do their friends know what to do? And here's a simple one. If I pull my iPhone out of my pocket and I push the button and I tell Siri I want to kill myself, does everybody know what happens? May I connect you with the National Crisis Helpline? Every smartphone has the ability to do that. And of course, lots of your students, they're really into texting. All right, there's a 24-hour crisis text line. You text any word like help to 741-741, and a trained person is texting you back. So we have to really emphasize to students, get to a trusted adult. If there's not one available immediately, crisis text line, National Suicide Prevention Helpline. Actually, the figures for this valley are a little higher than the state of Montana overall, but a tremendous challenge for us. So what is suicide prevention in schools? It's actually what we're doing today is a big part of it. Everybody knowing the warning signs, what to look for, what to do, the referral process, don't keep a secret, work as a team, making sure our school mental health professionals are well trained. I spent 4 hours with them yesterday, making sure their policies and procedures, all the administrators are invested in suicide prevention, making sure parents are notified when there's any reason to suspect suicidal behavior for their child, making referrals, because the level of treatment a suicidal adolescent needs is beyond that of a school counselor, given that school counselors have hundreds of students to worry about. So we've got to secure the treatment in the community and convince parents to follow through, increase supervision, and yes, remove lethal means. And if they go in the hospital, we got to be able to share information from the hospital or the private practitioner to the school. We need reentry meetings if they're coming back from a hospital. And then we need to have carefully planned discussions in classrooms with students about how to help yourself, how to help your friends. You know, a ninth grade girl one time in the classroom discussion, she raised her hand and said, I did absolutely what you said last year in 8th grade. I told the school counselor. He made me feel like I was some kind of a snitch. So she did the right thing, and a counselor dropped the ball. You know, I said this on Monday night. Anything I'm saying to you tonight, it's based on 40 years of working on this. So please know, if I did know something about one of these families or one of these victims, I wouldn't share it with you. I'm talking about what I have seen countless times all across this country. Okay, moving on again. Think about this one for a moment. Very high suicide rates for our GLBTQ students. And frankly, I got a lot of positives for Monday night, but I did get a message like, you needed to talk more about this population. Well, I only had so much time. And let me be frank, there's more support for this population in some places in America than in other places. But what is the single greatest protective factor for a GLBTQ youth? It's parental acceptance. Michael, good friend of mine, Michael said, Scott, when I came out 14 years ago, my dad said, Michael, you're dead to me. Michael's dad hasn't spoken to him in 14 years. How? How can we stop that from happening in our families? So this was a young man where I used to work. Mom enrolled him in a middle school of about 1,400. Mom told the school counselor, you know, he's got a couple of those psychiatric diagnoses. He's been bullied in every previous school. Now look at the physical description of the young man. Small for his age, pale, frail, bad skin rash on his face, spoke with a lisp, and he walked funny. What do you think middle school is going to be like for him? What class is probably going to be the most challenging? PE. Now, I want to be fair to PE teachers. You got a lot of kids in there at one time. Do you know what this PE teacher said? Didn't even know who that kid was until after he killed himself. Would you agree he should have stood out the moment he walked into school? Since we know that bullying peaks in middle school, he should have stood out as a kid who was going to need a lot of support and somebody that needed to be supervised really closely, especially in large groups and in locker rooms. Some of the legislation in Texas about bullying prevention in schools is named in memory of Asher Brown. I think I've got another one here. So I was involved in this case. I was on the side of the school district. I sincerely believe they didn't do anything wrong. Brandon was bullied, but they provided support for Brandon. They provided consequences for the bullies. But one day in 5th grade, Brandon wrote a suicide note. He actually drew a picture of himself hanging. The note said, if somebody doesn't stop me, I will hang myself at 4:35 today. And he handed it to a 5th grade classmate. Have you ever expected a 5th grader to be in that position, receiving a note like that? Were they ever prepared for that at Sunday school or in 5th grade or around the kitchen table? Unfortunately not. She didn't do anything. Brandon went home and he hung himself that afternoon. Somewhere around 5th grade, we got to start talking to kids about warning signs of depression and suicide and getting help, getting that adult help. So let's get this entire slide up, Erica. And I think I pretty well covered a lot of it. Some of you may have college-age students. Second leading cause of death for college students as well. So let's move on, Erica. Next slide, please. Put the entire slide up, and I'll let you glance at it. And I'm going to be honest. In New Mexico, not too long ago, a guy came up to me and he said, you know, you're an okay speaker. I listened to you for 5.5 hours. But you made that comment about guns in the beginning, and then I pretty much just tuned you out. But I feel a responsibility to just be straightforward. And if I could do it and make sure all the guns in this valley were secured from young people, that doesn't mean they can't be in the homes. That just means they can't be left out and loaded. Let me quote a kid. Suicide, it was in Missoula. The principal says, Scott, she could have used any one of 30 loaded and unsecured guns in her home. So if people get angry with me for this, I'm just trying to save lives of young people. And all right, let's move on to the next slide, please. We covered that well enough. Let's move to the next one. This is the single place in America where the most suicides occur. After 60 years of debate, there's finally going to be a barrier. And it's going to save lives. It's that simple. Moving on again, please, Erica. Thanks. So that root of mental illness, and it's like things come together. This long-standing struggle with mental health issues, something they've been thinking about, suicide for a long time, something causes them to take action. Most commonly, severe argument with the parent, breakup of a relationship, severe humiliation, or maybe a discipline problem at school, or maybe even about to be arrested. It's called a precipitating event. It causes them to take action. So we have to be alert for those precipitating events. Okay, moving on to the next one. So no one cause, no one factor, lots of things almost coming together in a perfect storm. Moving on again, Erica, thanks. I think I just mentioned pretty much every one of those. I don't know, I didn't mention loss, but that certainly also can be a precipitating event. Okay, on to the next one. So what do you tell a 14-year-old girl devastated by the first significant romance in her life, and now it looks like it is a breakup, it is over? You know what we have a tendency to do? Say something like, I know today seems really hard, but things will get better. Time pretty much has a way of healing everything. If you'll just trust me on this, every day things are going to get better. Oh, and you know, I'd like to talk to you about what happened to me when I was 14. Oh, I got through that. I'm 72 today. I'm really happy. Does that help anybody? Did I even focus on her? Shouldn't I have been using this? It must seem so hard for you. You must be so worried. I can't imagine how difficult this is. I'm here to listen. How can I help? I should have used all those things. By the way, if you don't mind me telling you, when I was 14, Doris Nelson broke up with me, and I am sure she is still sorry. Sir, she started dating a senior. She married that SOB. I can't even find her on Facebook. All right, thank you for humoring me with a little laughter, but I mean, we've got to have it. We got to find something that reduces our tension a little bit. All right, teachers are gatekeepers. Let's put this entire slide up, Erica. Basically, is like you see the kids every single day. They may say something. There may be something a little different about their behavior. They may write something. They may be checking out a book. I just talked to the librarian at Big Fork High School about paying attention to the books that kids are checking out, given what's happened in that particular community. It's about knowing your students, knowing them well, and whenever you see something that's worrisome, sharing that information with your team. Moving on again, Erica. So, back up one. So those are the warning signs. You probably know these. Dramatic changes in behavior, not taking pride in appearance, giving away of prized possessions, making out a will. These are all warning signs, and especially with adolescents. They're just overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. There's a lot of pressure on adolescents today. I think I could pretty convincingly say the mental health needs of kids in America might be at their highest level ever right now. And we are still in the middle of a pandemic. 700,000 Americans have died from that pandemic. We've had maybe the most divisive politics that I can remember in my lifetime. And guess what? It's really difficult to get into the top colleges today. I never could have done it, not with the kind of grades I had in high school. Something that, you know what I like to share with kids? I actually got kicked out of college the first time for poor scholarship. You know what? I would have been a really lousy accountant. Maybe it worked out. Maybe I did okay. I got 3 degrees. So sometimes some kids aren't ready. Some kids need to work a while. They need to kind of find themselves. And The main point of that is, of course, it is not going to go perfectly for everybody. All right, let's move on again, Erica. Thanks. It is preventable. That's the key message on that slide. All right, moving on again. Yes, follow all of the well-described procedures to work as a team and get help. So let's go on to another slide. And I've said this many times, but if you glance at that, the whole thing is don't be afraid of this subject. You know what I would really hope? Every kid graduating from a Montana high school from this point forward would just know what to look for, what to do. They might need the information next year in college. They might need it on the first job. They might need it with an elderly neighbor 10 years from now. So moving on again, thanks. And those are some phrases that you could use when you're walking a kid down to the guidance office. Thank you for trusting me. We are here for you as a school. Thanks for confiding in me. I just want to keep you safe. Okay? All right, moving on again. I think we've covered that. Let's move on. This is the best piece of advice I can give you. Sadly, when a suicide occurs, it is extremely challenging to try to figure out what to do. I helped write that. It's from federal sources like the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and the Suicide Prevention Resource Center. And I know this toolkit has been used widely in your school system. Moving on again. Now, I'd be remiss today not to quickly talk about something that is a bit of an exploding behavior. That's kids that engage in what's called non-suicidal self-injury. They engage in cutting or burning. And you might be wondering why they do that. It actually regulates emotions. It releases endorphins. The very endorphins we wish would be released through exercise, for example. And telling them how horrified we are and never do that again, unfortunately, that doesn't work. We've got to really focus on what are the underlying issues, how can we help them set a goal of finding other strategies and maybe engaging in this behavior less this week than in last week. But it fulfills a multitude of complex needs. Next slide, please. So these young people experience emotions very deeply. They are very sensitive. The bottom line, it works, at least for a while, but then it has diminishing returns. So cutting isn't working as well today to regulate emotions as maybe it did some months ago. And we really need to get these young people into treatment in the community. And it can persist well into adulthood. Next slide, please. And it also can be a bit contagious, meaning where do kids learn this behavior? They learn it from other kids that say, you know what helped me when I had that severe argument with my mom? I got out a knife. I made these little cuts. You know, one young woman she's actually a graduate student. She walked into my office the other day and she closed the door and she said, I want to talk to you about my cutting behavior. She rolled up her sleeves. She showed me 750 scars on her left arm. And I asked her like the obvious question, thankfully those are healed up. Are you still doing this? Are there other scars and fresh cuts? And she's like, no, I've got control of it. Well, what helped you to control this? Well, I got some treatment in the community. And then I also learned that there are just certain times that I can't trust myself with the razor blade. And I would get like cardboard and I would like rip it to bits because there are a lot of strategies out there to teach kids to do something to get through a few difficult moments besides engaging in self-injury. All right, next slide, please. So this is what we want to do, which is connect with them, increase the circle of care. That critically must involve parents. Get them treatment in the community. Teach them some of those substitute strategies. And I did a video for the state of Florida, and I'll show you where you could find it if you're interested. But I interviewed 2 young women. They actually got a national award for their willingness to talk about their struggle with self-injury. I mean, I asked them all the logical questions like, what treatment worked? What didn't work? You know what they said? They liked the counselors the best, that the first question wasn't, are you still cutting? They wanted counselors who wanted to talk with them about underlying issues in their life. They talked about their parents and how they both got into power struggles with their parents because their parents just demanded that they never do that again. So they really provide a lot of insight. And especially for those of you that are mental health professionals, I would encourage you to watch it. It wasn't just an old guy like me talking about a behavior I never engaged in. I just asked them all those logical questions like, why'd you do it? What was happening before you would cut? What helped you get control of it? How do you manage it now? It was also interesting that they both quickly named their cutting instruments. You know how they referred to them? My friend. What got me through difficult times. So unfortunately, this is a very complex, powerful behavior that requires a lot of treatment. Now, the bottom line, of course, why did I get interested in self-injury? Because I'm all about suicide prevention. Young people engaging in cutting, they're habituating, they're getting comfortable harming their body. And therefore, they are one step closer to making suicide attempts. Lori and Emily, you know what they both said? They hid the behavior for a long time. The adults didn't find out until they actually both got hospitalized because they attempted suicide. Then somebody figured out they've been engaging in cutting behavior for a long time. So there's where that video is. I direct the Suicide and Violence Prevention website. There are lots of resources there. And perhaps the single greatest resource, Cornell Self-Injury Center. So challenging times about the screen age, I already mentioned that in terms of what can we do? Technology-free times in our homes. You know what the moms say? It's my husband. He'll never put down his phone. I know we need to have a technology-free meal time, but I can't get him to participate. And a lot of children are exposed to trauma and loss. What are their typical reactions? And when I say typical, I'm not talking about unusual. I'm talking like every single time. They regress academically, they regress behaviorally, they have nightmares, sleeping problems, and worry about the future. By the way, if I had a simple thing that I would wish for all of you, that would be getting the proper amount of rest. When we do that, we're in a much better place to deal with everything going on in our life. High school kids, by the way, they're chronically sleep deprived. Why? Part of it is we start school too early, but the other thing has to do with the technology. Yet I made this statement to parents in a suburb of Atlanta. Tell your children, it's time to go to bed now. Hand me all your technology. It will be charged and ready to go for you in the morning. And a lady came up to me and she said, my daughter's 13. What if her friends needed to talk to her in the middle of the night? They would not be able to reach her. What's wrong with your daughter's friend talking to her parents if something is so serious at 3 a.m.? You know, I didn't convince her. She walked away believing that her daughter needed to be available 24/7. And that's interrupting her daughter's sleep. There's some research saying 25% of all adolescent girls wake up in the middle of the night to see who posted what. So a simple thing, remember going back to all that technology, that $800 cell phone, it's a privilege. It's not a right. And if it's part of the problem, we have to increase our supervision. All right, moving on again, please. So, common sense media. How many of you are familiar with common sense media? Because I'd love to see some hands. Okay, you want to know if this is appropriate program developmentally? Common sense media is going to tell you. And they have digital citizenship from like kindergarten all the way through high school. So some pretty sobering statistics about teenagers and being online, but just know common sense media. And by the way, what'd they say about 13 Reasons Why? No kid under the age of 16 should ever watch it, period. And if you're over 16 and you've had a problem with anxiety and depression or being bullied, you shouldn't watch it even then. So a great resource for you. Okay, we'll move on past 13 Reasons Why. We've pretty well covered that. Screen time, that's 6.5 hours a day. That's frankly probably a bit of an underestimate. And the concern is they aren't learning how to interact one-on-one with people. So do what you can to try to really encourage in-person interactions. It also results in a lot less exercise. All right, next slide. Thank you. I'm going to make a couple of quick statements and I'm going to explain to you why. I went into countless classrooms the day after somebody died in a car accident. You don't want to do that anymore. Here's a phrase I hope you'll remember. Don't be intoxicated. What's the most dangerous thing all of you are going to do today? It's going to involve the phone in your car. You know what teenagers say? I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, I look up every 5 or 8 seconds or so to see where the car's going. By the way, Gandhi had a great quote. What we do speaks so loudly to our children that when we try to talk to them, they can't hear us. So if I text and drive, if I drink and drive, why wouldn't I expect our 4 children and now 20 grandchildren to do the same thing? By the way, our son Jeremy has 8 children. Would somebody please tell him to stop? Okay, thank you. So very important that, and there are, I'm not positive about Montana, but many states have graduated driving laws restricting the hours of young drivers. Nobody in the car under the age of 21. By the way, 16-year-olds die 3 times more often. It's not about recklessness so much as it's about distractibility and inexperience. And just in Big Fork, they were telling me about a young man who died in a car accident not long ago. So this is obviously a community and a parent issue to try to prevent those car accidents. Moving on again, Erica. So we need to make sure we talk to children in developmentally appropriate language. But you know what the simplest thing to do? I just like to tell kids the truth and then find out what's on their mind. A great thing about adolescents, I like to call it a gift of hope. They want to do something to make the world better. You got a lot of high school students that are trying to figure out right now what to do in memory of the suicide victims. What might actually help somebody who's living? And a Big Fork student met with me this morning, and I shared with her some ideas about what students themselves can do to focus more on prevention and awareness, trying to stop those accidental deaths, trying to stop suicidal deaths and homicidal deaths. And I want to say just a couple of things about schools and safety. School safety, in my opinion, is an inside job. Getting commitment from the student body first, then the entire faculty and the community. It was mentioned in my introduction, yes, I've responded on site to 16 school shootings. But do you know where kids in America actually get murdered the most? At home. About 1% of the murders for children occur at school. Schools are actually the safest places children go. And of course, one school shooting in America is unacceptable. We got to work on prevention of violence, not just at school, in our homes and in our communities. That's what we must do. And in all honesty, some schools have gone a little overboard. We don't want to do any drills at school that scare people. We don't want to scare kids about a place where they actually should feel safe. You know what I think it's all about? Will all of your students listen to the nearest adult, and whatever the adult says to do, no questions asked, that's what they do. We don't need gunfire. We don't need simulated injuries. We just need to practice getting into a safe and protected place quickly. Okay, routines are incredibly important. That was a big part of the discussion today. No, it was certainly not a normal day at Big Fork High School, but every day is making a little bit more normal. And the message has to be to everybody. We will get through this together. We'll help the adults first, and then the adults will all be in a better position to help students. We will get through this together. Right outside my office, there's a poster. It says, life is a struggle right now, but there will be a future. And that's the modeling that every one of you has to do for your students and your own children. Modeling optimism, modeling hope. We will get through all of this together. Next slide, please, Erica. So, sort of goes with many things that I've been talking about in terms of help for yourself first. Now, you know your children the best, but what is that shared time when you'll actually have them talk to you? One dad came up to me Monday and said, you know, I got 7 kids. Okay, my life's pretty busy. And you know, it's a matter of, sometimes it's only a few minutes. But you ever had somebody basically make you feel like you're the only person in the world that matters to them right now? That's what you want to do with your students and your children. Maybe it's only for a few minutes, but you focus absolutely, totally on them. That's what kids need. And when you've got a lot of kids, it's obviously more difficult. But even if it's just for a few minutes, where you're totally not distracted by anything, you really focus on what is it they are saying to you. Okay, let's move on again, please. Okay. You know, McDonald's says they have the full value meal. Where do I think that actually is? That's around the kitchen table in the homes in Kalispell. Free and easy communication between kids and parents. That's where the real full value meal is. The other thing is, so many kids in America now that are adolescents, it's like their room is an absolute little kingdom. They have every technology device known to man in that room. Why are they going to come out? Only one reason. Mom made dinner. But watch them try to pick up that plate of food and take it back into their bedroom to eat in isolation. You know, it's harder when there's been a divorce. And to be honest with you, there were many times when I was mad at my ex-wife, but I never told our children about it. You know what I always remembered? She will be Joe and Jeremy's mother forever. She deserves my support, emotionally, financially, and she deserves my respect. But unfortunately, there are lots of kids, when there's a separation or a divorce, they feel like they're somehow to blame. If you ever had a 7-year-old kid say something like, if I'd have been better in second grade, I bet my daddy wouldn't have left us. How do you help them understand? And by the way, men are so important in kids' lives. When dads are involved, the research says kids are healthier, happier, and they simply do better in school. Now, we've had a lot of years with all the milestones that you would imagine, with graduations and birthdays. You know what? Everybody's there and everybody's nice. Isn't that what every kid deserves? And when we bring kids into this world, we got to realize we are partners forever with, maybe they're our ex-wife or ex-husband, but we are partners forever in raising those children. And there's often a gap between what parents think is going on in their kids' lives and what's actually happening. I hope you're the parent that actually not only know your kids' friends, you know the kids' friends' parents. You're going to be the one that calls. You're going to be the one that checks to make absolutely certain that what your kid told you was going on is actually what's happening. And I'd also be remiss tonight not to bring up something else. It has to do with alcohol and kids. What did I say to Jill and to Jeremy? The law is 21. I will never look the other way. I will never provide it. I will never condone it. And in my humble opinion, your grandparents, all 4 of them were alcoholics. Alcoholism seems to run in my family. Are the Poland family the only ones with the problem with alcohol? So what was I really saying to them? I hope you won't drink at all. When you're 21, I still hope you won't drink. Okay, moving on. And bullying. So I think you already know it peaks in middle school. It happens with incredible frequency. All you have to do is you look at the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey data for Montana. It's going to tell you how many kids say they were bullied at school, how many kids were bullied online, how many kids didn't feel safe at school, how many kids didn't come to school because of feeling unsafe, how many kids got in a fight at school, how many kids got in a fight out of school, how many kids don't wear seat belts, for example. That data, and many states also gather it for middle schoolers. It's really helpful in terms of us knowing what are the at-risk behaviors. And again, unfortunately, not every kid can identify a go-to trusted adult. So I'm in Rapid City, South Dakota, talking like pretty much I'm emphasizing the points today, and a middle school principal goes, I actually surveyed all my middle schoolers a week ago about do they have a trusted adult at school. 27% said no. So the question is, how do we change that so 100% actually say yes? Moving on again, high-risk groups. We already talked about LGBTQ young people. I get calls like these. I'm a school counselor in the middle of Kansas. By the way, that's where I grew up. And the school counselor goes, I want to start a gay-straight alliance. The principal said no, the superintendent said no. What can I do? We've got to find a way to support those students. And I think that's becoming an increasingly big issue in the Flathead Valley. There is a gay-straight alliance, and that's wonderful. In some places around the country, the American Civil Liberties Union actually sued schools that would not allow gay-straight alliances. So, and Gandhi had another quote. And I think it's so applicable for 2021. Our challenge is to find both the beauty and the unity in diversity. South Florida is the most diverse place I've ever lived. 2 weeks ago, and our university owns a very incredible golf course. It's actually where they film Caddyshack, if you're a golfer. Well, I'm really sorry to tell you that 2 members of the grounds crew died within a week of each other of COVID. I was the guy asked to go talk to the grounds crew. What did I figure out? Some of them speak Creole, some of them speak Spanish, some of them speak English. So I had to have translators. But you know, a guy stands up in Creole and he says, some of us are Black, some of us are Latino, some of us speak English, some speak Spanish, some speak Creole, but we all like each other. That's what we need, a country where everybody actually likes each other and is kind to each other. And I shared this in a group the other day. I went back to one of those high school reunions so many years ago, but as I'm walking up to the building, I hear somebody say, there is Scott Poland, he was so mean. I can't tell you how badly that made me feel, and how I only had 80 kids in my class. Today, I'd be trying to be friends with every single one of them. But what was it about me as an adolescent? And I hope I wasn't mean, but apparently I must have been. So it's like we need so much kindness and compassion in this world, and it seems to be missing. All right, let's move on to the next one. And I think I could sum up the next couple of slides with this particular statement. A dad goes, how do I know she's really depressed? She's a teenager, right? They're moody, they're irritable. I think she's preparing me for she's going away out of state to college next year. Dad, let me ask you some questions. Is this persistent? Has this gone on for several weeks? Yes. Is it pervasive? Is it affecting homeschool peers, pretty much everything? Yes, it is. Has she dropped out of something she previously really enjoyed? As a matter of fact, yes. She always loved dance, but this year she said, I don't care about it anymore. You've got a depressed child. She needs help. About 20% of all teenagers suffer from depression at some point during those tumultuous years. The literature is going to tell you 80% of them receive no treatment whatsoever. Get treatment. You know, a Parkland parent came up to me and said, my daughter knew 3 of the victims. I think she needs counseling. She says, I won't go. Dad, I don't think that's a decision your 14-year-old can make. Here's a possible choice. You want to talk to a male counselor or a female counselor? You want me in the waiting room? You want me in the session? There's another choice. You know your daughter needs help, and get her help. So I've actually had presentations before where I've wanted to have all the parents stand up and repeat after me. I am the parent. My happiness does not depend on whether my 11-year-old likes me at this moment. I usually don't go that far, but after one session, the middle school principal called back and said, oh, the parents love what you had to say. They want you to come back to the school. But why would I go back? They want you to tell their children why they're going to change things. So I think a big part of everything that's happening in this valley is to figure out more ways to reach parents. All right, moving on again. Let's move again. I think we pretty well covered those. So self-care. About 16 months ago, one of my good friends called me up He says, Scott, you need to talk about the pandemic and coping and helping kids, schools, teachers, parents. I'm like, Steve, my whole career is school violence and youth suicide prevention. You can do this. So I reluctantly decided to take it on. You know what the university estimates? Through Zoom, I've reached more than 100,000 people talking about coping with this pandemic. And I came up with a little simple acronym. The word is CALM. All right, that's important, but I wanted to let every letter stand for something. For the C, what can you control? Which is largely your reaction to everything and the choices you and your family make. The A stands for a couple of things. One being really alert to the changes and needs of your students, your children, your coworkers, your family. But the A, that also stands for being available, to truly being there, to listen to people. And the L, that's listening. But it's also one more thing, limiting television coverage. Do you remember times when, I couldn't even turn on the television to see the overrun ICUs, to see the person that couldn't say goodbye to their partner for 40 years, to see the portable morgues being moved next to hospitals. So I talked to Donna and I said, we got to stop turning on the television in the morning. We could glance at it on our phone. Let's go for a walk. And in all honesty, my wife got depressed. For a while, we were renovating a house and that kept her busy. But then that was done. And then she had all these grandchildren that we were not being allowed to see for countless reasons, but some of it being the control on the part of our children. So I did what a lot of people did to try to help her get out of that depression. I bought her a puppy. And of course, we wanted to get a rescue dog, but there were none of those available in South Florida. Do you know, I was telling Superintendent Hill, we paid more for that puppy. I bought cars for less than the cost of that puppy. But little Taffy has really done wonders, okay? So she was definitely worth it. So somehow people got the impression that self-care was somehow selfish. Self-care is about taking care of you so you can help your loved ones, your coworkers, and your family. One other thing that really worked for Donna, she got into paint by numbers. She got one of those for me. I took a look at the fine motor requirements and I'm like, not happening for me. But she sits there for like hours and it really helps keep her calm. And by the way, a simple piece of advice, we got to always focus on what's right in front of us. Keeping busy has helped me. Have you ever heard it's called the worry time strategy? All right, I'm having these thoughts during the day about all the awful things about this world and all the tragedies. And I go, wait a minute. Tonight between 7 and 7:20, that's my worry time. I'll think all those awfulization thoughts tonight at 7 o'clock. But right now, I'm concentrating on what is right in front of me. So there's the typical cycle of stressors. We all get stressed, and it leads to a need for self-care. So here's the physical part of this: diet, exercise, getting outside. So we actually lived at Hollywood Beach. They closed the beach, okay? That's like just walking outside, looking at the ocean. That's something that really is helpful, but okay, so the beach is closed. So getting outside, that should have always been an option and encouraged, okay? Riding a bicycle, you're not ever going to be within 6 feet of anybody riding a bicycle. So it's kind of unfortunate. Some of the strategies really restricted us from getting outside. And then finding the way to express the personal you. Maybe it is painting, maybe it's art, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's gardening. all of the things you do that basically helps you have an outlet. Letting go of criticism. Lots of people made mistakes, said things to others they would like to take back. Just simply apologize. I'm going to do it better. I'm going to work on handling things better. So there's the spiritual side. And being connected to a place of worship is really helpful to a lot of people. But not everyone goes to church every week. There's just a common set of values that educators have, but lots of people don't have all these. It's about being kind, compassionate, friendly, helpful, really just embracing others and treating everybody with respect. I only wish everybody in our country just had these common set of values. And I want you to think for a moment about who is that positive person in your life that gives you the support and encouragement? Who is that person? Because that's what we all need. And I hope you will be that person for others. And specifically, all of us, but especially children, we need 5 positives for every statement that's a criticism or a put down. That's how everything should operate in our schools, our family, our workplace, which pointing out the good things people do about 5 times for every little zap. And every kid, no matter how many problems they have, they all do far more right than they do wrong. And you know all about separating the deed from the doer, but not every parent does. It's like every kid makes mistakes. But our love for them as a person, that should never, ever be in question. And kids need to experience consequences. Working in the schools all those years, there were lots of parents that never wanted their kid to experience a consequence. They get mad at you, and all you're trying to do is have a kid experience a consequence so they learn from it. I always say to parents, you know what? The people who work in education, they care about kids. And if one of them tells you there's a concerning behavior, don't get defensive. Figure out how you can work with the school. And one of my favorite examples, and I'm going to take a moment and share it. Jeremy was 3 years old. He could still ride in the grocery cart when we're at the supermarket. And he's in the cart. I'm picking out some bananas. And I hear this little voice say, "Dad, am I the boy you always wanted?" He gave me a chance to say, "Absolutely. You're the son I always dreamed of." You know what I want to ask you to do? When you go home today, tell your sons and daughters they are the children you always dreamed of. Not for who they might become someday, just how much you love and care about them right now. And that'll go a long way towards helping them be successful in this challenging world. And one time, even before I left the building in Colorado, a mom comes up and she says, "My son's in college. I texted him saying, 'You're the son I always dreamed of.'" He texted back saying, "You're the mom I always dreamed of." We really need that in our families at this difficult time. And we need these "I can" statements. I can get enough exercise. I can eat properly. I can get the proper amount of rest. So now you might be sitting there thinking, what about a little kid? Because one more slide, Erica. I think So let me just talk about little kids. A little kid, you get out the poster board. You have them draw a picture in the middle, picture of themselves, or you print out a picture. And then you have them draw. I can help others by doing these things. I can eat these healthy things. I can get the proper rest by doing these things. I can be happy if I do these things. So self-care is critical for everybody. Okay, I think I've pretty well covered all those. Let's move on. Resiliency. Boy, is that important right now in your schools. So what is it? It's the ability to bounce back. It's primarily a learned behavior. So what are the keys to resiliency? Being surrounded by loving and caring family and friends, having problem-solving skills, being comfortable venting strong emotions, always being optimistic about the future. Resiliency and recovery are possible. They need to be the expectation as the norm. Moving on, Erica. So this is from the Carnegie Foundation. They actually weighed in on what is it kids need for success. Now they said 3 or more significant adults in their lives besides their parents. Most of us decided that's maybe aiming a bit high. Let's just try for 1 significant adult besides a parent. So what do I mean by that? She has a soccer game. Who's going to show up? Is somebody going to drive down from Big Fork? Is one of you going to go watch? He's going to sing in the choir on Sunday. Is somebody going to go? A neighbor across the street? Basically, who's going to show up to say, you are important to me? We've got to have significant adults involved in kids' lives. Parents can't all do it by themselves. And then obviously we want everybody to have a sense of safety, security, and belonging in their home, their school, and in their community. Now I want to talk about organized activities for a moment. So I'm a big believer in those. I was just chatting with Joel, the soccer coach at Big Fork, telling him, yeah, I didn't know anything about soccer, but I signed up to coach my kid's soccer team when he was 5. I coached it for 11 years. 10 kids played on our team the entire 11 years. You know what my goal was as a psychologist? I want to make it fun. I want to make it something they want to do every single fall. And I did share with them, you know, when they were 15, we won the Texas Recreational Championship. So we got pretty good working all those years together. But then there was Bobby Bryan. Bobby Bryan's name was on the roster that very first year. So I'm leaving messages for his mother because he's not coming to my practice. And finally I get Claire on the phone and she goes, take his name off. My husband just left us going to Chicago. I work until 6 o'clock every night. Bobby is never going to get to a practice. Well, where is he after school, Claire? He goes to a daycare. You know, if you give me written permission, I will pick him up at the daycare. I'll take him to practice, and I'll make sure you have returned home before I take him to your house. You know, I drove Bobby Bryan to practice. Well, that last year, he was 16, he had his own car. So I drove him to practice for 10 years. By the way, he was a great kid and a great soccer player. Bobby Bryan is in the Navy. He's got 4 kids. We are friends on Facebook. So it's really about getting involved and staying involved in kids' lives. So Leroy, he's a kid with problems. That's why I see him every week. He's 9 years old. He comes in and says, you know what I want to do? I just want to play Little League Baseball. Leroy, I know where the forms are. We're going to get you signed up. You don't understand. My mom doesn't have $70, and she could never get me to a practice. Now, what's at the other end of the spectrum? Kids at university school on our campus. My wife finished out her school career. She went from public schools to being a private school principal. You know what's amazing? what you get if you can pay $35,000 a year for your kid's private education. You get really small classes. You get a teacher's aide in every class. You get to play hockey in South Florida. So, you know what I wish? I wish we'd spend that amount of money on every single kid's education. But you know what the problem was at university school? My message to the parents was a little different. Ask your kid to pick one activity a season, because too many activities causes kids stress. My club team and my school team conflict. My school play and my community play conflict. Don't you want your kid's life to revolve around your family? So, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Raise your hand if you think you know a kid that absolutely they will make their living in professional sports. Do you know what I think they should all be about? Having fun, being a teammate, being a part of something. And so let me quote one of our assistant principals. Keep in mind, we had high schools of 4,000. Scott, these Hispanic boys in the high school, they love basketball. They be too short. You ever seen a 6'4" Hispanic man walking around in America? Because I haven't. But what's the most important point? They love basketball. So it's really a matter of how do we open up facilities and use our gyms and YMCAs, whatever we have, so every kid that likes basketball actually gets to play. So volunteer work. Here's my favorite quote for adolescents. The only way that you're probably going to find yourself is through service to other people. I actually have a little sticker on my bulletin board. Guess what? The universe does not revolve around you. And how do you learn that? You volunteer, you help somebody, and you can't help but feel so much better about yourself. So when I get a chance to recommend, let's double the amount of community service hours for young people, because that's how they learn what this world is actually about. All right, next slide, please. Oh, that's me 47 years ago. Do I wish I had all that hair back? Of course. That's Rodney. Rodney and I were matched through the Big Brothers program. Rodney never knew his dad. Rodney's mom was on welfare. She was trying, but she had limited resources. Rodney and I have had quite the rewarding relationship, because next slide, please, Erica. There we are 47 years later. Rodney is 60 years old. He's going to be 61 years old in about 10 days. Want me to be honest? Big Brothers, Big Sisters officially ends at age 18. But we did not want to end our relationship. There is generally a 4-year waiting list to get a big brother in every place in America. And I was excited to see Big Brothers and Big Sisters in Kalispell. But more men need to step forward. The waiting list to get a big sister, generally only about 4 months. What's that say about women getting more involved in kids' lives than men? You know, when Jill finished college, she's known Rodney her entire life. She signed up in Houston. She's a big sister to a 12-year-old girl named Anna. We've got to get involved in kids' lives. You know, one of my friends said to me, I can't believe you're still helping Rodney. Well, Rodney doesn't have anybody else. His mother died a long time ago. Rodney has struggled mightily as an adult, mostly financially. He has a high school diploma. He's always been a cook or a custodian. He said, Scott, it's pretty hard to make it when the most money you've ever made in your life is $22,000. It is pretty hard to have a car payment and pay rent with a low salary like that. So just before I came to Montana. By the way, I can't even send him a check. He doesn't have a checking account. So he would lose what, 4 or 5% if he goes to a check cashing place. But he needed $100 just to have gas and food until the next paycheck. And of course, I've always talked to him about, you got to have a rainy day fund, Rodney. You got to put some money aside. You need a part-time job in addition to your job as a custodian, because his hours got cut. And then there was a time he was going to kill himself. Thankfully, we got through that. There was a time when he was living in his car. We got through that, got him out of his car. So it's actually been quite rewarding. Why do I help him? Because I want to, and because I can. And that's really the message for all of you as we work to really get involved in kids' lives. I love this quote. What helps a disadvantaged kid? It's one charismatic adult who's never going to give up. Most of the time, that person is an educator. So we're very fortunate to have the Nate Shute Foundation here. And I can't help but give you an example of two of my teachers. Mrs. A. You know what Mrs. A said to me? She was my senior English teacher. By the way, she wore sunglasses every day in class. We thought she had a hangover. I mean, I don't know. Okay. Mrs. A took me aside and said, Scott, you will be wasting your parents' money if you even attempt to go to college. You know, I wrote to her a few years ago. Coach Ed became the principal, became the superintendent. Coach Ed said, you know, I gave Mrs. A your letter. I just wanted to let her know that, oh, maybe I've done okay. I thought I might get a little note back saying, thanks for what you do. No response. But Coach Ed, on the other hand, and you know, he's only 11 years older than me. I was his first quarterback, okay? So we've kept in contact all these years. And whenever I have time, I just love to call and talk to Coach Ed. I mean, he came to birthday parties, he came to, you know, various events with our children, and he just really wanted to stay involved in my life forever. And I'm pretty sure that's what a lot of you hope to do with many of your students. This has been very challenging times. Please be the difference in the lives of those young people that you care so much about. Now I'm going to turn it back to Superintendent Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate what you had to say today and to our community. Prior to this meeting, I was at a task force meeting with area legislators, city councilmen, the mayor, medical professionals. And we started off the meeting sorry, I had to write it down too. The first question we had to answer was, how are you feeling? Really? It's a hard question to answer. I know some of you, along with myself, are feeling pretty raw. I feel sad, frustrated, angry. I feel for our staff who have had to endure these tragedies and our families. And whether I knew the students personally or not, it pains me to think about all of those who were affected. I have watched and listened to our administrators, our counselors, our teachers, and our community struggle. How to process this, how to find ways to support one another. I also had the opportunity to listen to students express their grief and sadness and talk about what they need. I also had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Poland for 3 days in a row. I also want you to know that I'm filled with gratitude for the work that you do each and every day. You are caring and thoughtful and compassionate and empathetic and really, really good people. I think it's important for you to hear that. And I think it's important that you know our kids, our students are looking to you right now as much as they are looking to anyone else. They trust you, they know you, and they know that you care. And I want you to listen carefully to what I say next, because I want to give you permission. You have my permission to take a break from your curriculum to check on your students now and into the future. Anytime you want, you can do that. You have the permission from your building administrators. You can circle up the chairs in your classroom. You can give them space to talk. You can be there to listen. You can share what you think and what your vulnerabilities are. You don't have to fix anything. It's okay. Those lessons on dangling gerunds and infinitive phrases, English teachers know what I'm talking about. They can wait. You can postpone a test or a quiz. And Scott's right, there is routines and normalcy and things that we're going to do, and those are all okay too. Our students, whether they are outwardly expressing it, are hurting. And it's okay to show that you care. It's really hard to teach someone who's struggling. And it's okay to set aside what we do best, which is teaching, so that our students know that we care and feel safe. This morning, Callie and I were talking about my desire to communicate with you and whether I should do it in an email or in person. And I thought the best way was to do it in person. And she reminded me about a quote that she shared to a group of social studies teachers earlier this year. And the quote said, when the world says give up, hope whispers. Try it one more time. You are the hope. And I'm not only hopeful, but I'm confident that we will find our way through this. We have a compass. We have each other. I also want to give you permission to take care of yourself. You have to do this for you and for our students. You are our most important asset in this community right now. And I am beyond grateful for every one of you. I would also say in closing that if you ever need anything, pick up the phone, call someone you know and trust, call me. We're here for you and very grateful. So thank you and wish you blessings on the rest of your week, and take care of yourself and take care of each other.